Hello everyone, I hope your solstice is going well. For today's video I've got a Titan build that is super aggressive and one that you should be able to take in many places in the game, and is my personal favorite Titan build. I'm going to do this video a little differently. This video is going to be a longer video that goes more in depth on the build, while there will be a second TLDR version of the build that is just a quick overview of the build in 30 seconds. As always, there's a dim link in the description, and without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, time to take a bite off that purple crayon, my Crayola Crusaders. And starting with the aspects, we'll have Offensive Bulwark, which while we have an overshield or inside of our bubble, we will receive increased grenade regeneration and additionally increased melee damage and range. Notably, this makes our normal melee count as a powered melee, and keep that in mind for the remainder of the build. Our second aspect is Bastion. Bastion gives an overshield to our allies whenever we cast our super, and also our Barricade gains the ability to give us and nearby allies a full overshield. These two together will create a build oozing with synergy. Our Barricade gives more melee damage, our powered melee will also do so much more as shown later in the build, and our Fist is just the gift that keeps on giving. Let's hop right into the aspects now, starting with the Echo of Starvation. Whenever we pick up a Void Breach or an Orb of Power, we are granted Devour. For the Uninclined, Devour refreshes all of our health on any kill, gives us grenade energy on any kill, and also extends its own duration after any kill. Needless to say, it's an extremely powerful Void buff that we use to survive many dumb situations. Next up, we have the Echo of Instability. This is another powerful fragment that gives our Void weapons volatile rounds after grenade final blows. This gives us free damage and some explosiveness to any of our Void weapons after any grenade kill, which we do a lot with Devour available to us so much. It's also worth noting that volatile rounds are also intrinsically anti-barrier. Next up, we have the Echo of Expulsion. This makes our Void ability final blows explode, which works with our normal melee when we have an overshield because of Offensive Bulwark, meaning that our Fist is now an AoE, which is always a great thing to have. Additionally, this works with any Void ability that we use. Last but not least, we have the Echo of Cessation. This fragment makes our finishers apply volatile to enemies around us, and also creates a Void Breach when we defeat a volatile target, which we do regularly thanks to the Echo of Instability. The Void Breach not only gives us Devour, but also class ability energy to feed into Bastion even more. Later, we'll even talk about some synergies with the current seasonal artifact. Next up, let's talk about some abilities. The only one I find mandatory is Shield Bash. On any kill, it grants us a full overshield and can also suppress enemies, meaning that we are given anti-overload in our base kit, which is something worth noting. It also just sounds really good. For the rest of the abilities, I find that pretty much it's up to personal choice, but I like Magnetic Grenade due to its low cooldown, high single target damage, and its lack of self-damage so I don't eat my own overshield. The barrier is up to you because Bastion will extend the cooldown to the same time no matter the barrier, so either 7 foot tall or Short King is a good option, but I prefer to use Short King. The jump is also personal preference, but I use High Lift because I like to be wrong about things sometimes. I respect that Catapult is more widely used, but I'm bad at the game. And lastly, we will have the Super, which you can either use Bubble or Captain America. Either one is fine and you'll find success with both. Jumping into the armor, the exotic of choice is going to be the Severance Enclosure. This exotic gives us an explosion whenever we get a melee final blow or a finisher, and with how often we punch, and an even bigger exploding fist is exactly what we want. The icing on the cake is our finisher being a volatile explosion. These in tandem create an explosive build. The armor mods are a resistance of each type for more damage reduction, just make sure to swap them around if you need to. Going top down with our helmet, we have Ashes to Assets, and Hands-On for bonkers super regeneration, and Harmonic Siphon to create orbs on multi-kills on our Void weapons, which we do a lot. For our gloves, we have Firepower and Heavy-Handed for even more orb generation, and I use Fastball, but in all honesty, this should be a melee kickstart. I'm flat out wrong with Fastball. Our boots are a payoff to our orb generation, with Absolution Orbs of Restoration, and Invigoration. These work in tandem to make sure our abilities are constantly up all the time. And last but not least, the class item. Distribution and Outreach gives us even more ability cooldown reduction, and then Powerful Attraction to suck up all of the orbs that we're too lazy to pick up ourselves. Now let's talk about some weapons. In the kinetic slot, I use the Wastelander from Dares of Eternity with Slide Shot and 1-2 Punch. This has been my favorite shotgun since I've crafted it, and I would recommend to anyone that they do the same. It just feels great to use. But if you don't have one or don't want one, literally any 1-2 punch shotgun is a good move. One good standout option to me is the Ragnhild D with auto-loading holster and 1-2 punch. The main thing is that you just want your shield bash to do this.
Oh my god!
For the energy slot, I personally love Hollow Denial from the Season of the Haunted with Lead from Gold and Repulsor Brace. Needless to say, a great combination along with the incredible synergy for the build, but I understand this weapon can be hard to get in today's economy, so some good replacements are Age-Old Bond from Last Wish with, say, Repulsor Brace and Destabilizing Rounds, and if you can't get a hold of that, there's always the Unforgiven from the Duality Dungeon with Demolitionist and Repulsor Brace, or a ton of other good roll options. That's a great SMG. Lastly, for my heavy weapon, I use the Leviathan's Breath. I have not moved it from my heavy weapon slot in a while. It hits like a freight train and fires really fast with the catalyst as long as you don't miss. Plus it has intrinsic anti-unstoppable, which is great, as that's the only type of champion that we can't currently deal with just our subclass alone. It's a great option, and I highly recommend trying it out. It's phenomenal. Now for the seasonal artifact. This section may be outdated if you're watching after Season of the Deep, but there are still some great mods worth talking about. The first of which being Unto the Breach. This creates a Void Breach every time we defeat an enemy that has a Void debuff, which we do a lot of. Next is my personal favorite one, Protective Breach. This gives us a full overshield whenever we pick up a Void Breach, meaning that we can have even more consistent overshield for our overshield-based build, which is why it's my favorite. Lastly, we have Supernova. Whenever we pick up a Void Breach, we ready a weakening explosion for the next time we deal Void damage, which is always nice to get a free weaken just for the seasonal artifact. These three mods, while they're not permanent, they're still phenomenal, especially in the Season of the Deep. Alright, and now for some gameplay on the build. One thing that this build is really good at is versatility. You have the tools for most engagements just by yourself. The combination of Echo of Instability and our Grenade gives us a large amount of uptime on volatile rounds. This means when we can't run in punching things, we have a good weapon, damage, and AoE, as shown with how I treat the Squeebs in this Lost sector. Another thing worth pointing out is the value of Leviathan's Breath. It has great ammo economy, especially while using a double special loadout. It has the ability to take out these unstoppable abominations in 2 to 3 arrows depending on the range. It also does so really fast if you have the catalyst. It's a wonderful bow that even synergizes with our build. Then the constant overshield and devour. While not up all of the time when you're not punching things, it is in fact worth noting that having the option to get an overshield whenever with Bastion lets you play far more aggressively than normal. With an extra 45 health and additional damage reduction that stacks with our resistance, we are far tankier than we should be, allowing us to push further and get in enemies' faces much better than most. When it is smart to do so, and enemies won't instantly burst you down, it's always good to go in and start punching things. Each time, you create an Orb of Power and start refreshing all of your other abilities. I would recommend leading with a Shield Bash or your Barricade and begin to punch as many red bar enemies as possible while you have an Overshield. The Barricade is always nice because if you place it near a group of enemies, it also gives you a place to retreat. Just try to space them out so you never waste your Overshield. With all of that in mind, don't forget to throw your Grenade whenever you can at more distant enemies that aren't in punching range. Lastly, I'm using Bubble here. It serves as a twofold bonus. A great panic button should you ever get scared, or as I like to use it, the Thunderdome. Place it in a group of enemies and let them come into the bubble, then start hacking away with your fist. With Devour and Armor of Light, it's unlikely that you'll die in most tiers of content. With its short cooldown, you almost always have it, so why not spam it? It's also worth mentioning that weapons of light are really nice to have and increase the damage of our weapons if we need some range. And that's pretty much it for most of the tips of the build, but I'll leave the remainder of the Lost Sector here and uncut for some more gameplay if you would like to watch some of the varying situations play out with this build. See you guys soon. That's pretty much everything about the build. It was a ton of fun to make, and I loved making the video. I hope all of you enjoyed, and if you did, feel free to like and subscribe. Anyway, I'm gonna try to do at least a new build every single week. I think it would be fun, challenging, and eventually I'll have to scrape the bottom of the barrel. So, looking forward to that. Anyway, hope you all have a great day. Later.